And the last one, part of the Northwest Ordinance, was to say this, which was, there shall be neither slavery nor involuntary servitude in the said territory, otherwise than in the punishment of crimes whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, provided always that any person escaping into the territory from whom labor or service is lawfully claimed in any one of the original states, such fugitive may be lawfully reclaimed and conveyed to the person claiming his or her labor or service. Now, this is probably the most famous part of the ordinance because it becomes the reason why Ohio does not have slavery, or Indiana, or Illinois. Why north of the Ohio River there is not slavery, but south of the Ohio River there was. Legally, slavery is forbidden north of the Ohio River. Now, the reason for this was pretty simple. And it doesn't have to do with what you think it might have to do. It has to do with the widespread belief that the owning of slaves turned white men into bad people. That when white men owned slaves, they were lazy, they were arrogant, they tended to go around acting like they were big shots, beating people, whipping them, acting like somebody who thought they were really above everybody else. And so the idea was, keep slaves out of the territory and you will discourage white men from acting as if they're better than everybody else. Also, you keep slaves out of the territory, and what you do is allow wages to be the major way in which people earn their living. And slavery interferes with that system, and so the idea was, keep slavery out. Not because you're feeling like, oh, we want to be nice to black people. Quite the contrary. You don't want them at all in the territory. What you want to do instead is to set up a system where white men basically work on their own and earn their own money. So all of these things then taken together, all of these things that I've just laid out, establish the way in which the Northwest Territory is set up. We would call it today essentially development. That is, how was the territory going to be developed? What was it going to become like? And the idea was that government from Philadelphia at the time, where Congress met, would govern the territory basically by executive dictation and establish certain kinds of principles. Governor would set up all the local counties, governments, towns, and everything else and make the place function in a way in which it seemed to encourage people to be good citizens. And what it does essentially is to put a lot of emphasis on the governor doing things like, well, for example, he comes down the Ohio River. And by the time he comes down the Ohio River, he comes to what had become the principal location or settlement at a place in between where the Great Miami and the Little Miami rivers run into the Ohio River. The name of this place was Lausantville. And it was given that name by the locals, who just people, ordinary people from Kentucky and Pennsylvania who showed up and started building a place. Called it Lausantville because it was supposed to be town opposite the mouth of the Licking River. Now, if any of you from the Cincinnati area have been there, you know what I'm talking about already. The Licking River flows south into Kentucky across from what is now Cincinnati. Governor Sinclair said, Lausantville is not a fitting name for a great Republican empire. What we need is a name that conjures up Rome. And so we will talk about the great Roman general Cincinnatus, who was willing to sacrifice for his country. He was a farmer, theoretically. He actually owned slaves. But this notion of the story of Cincinnatus was that Cincinnatus was a famous Roman who, when he heard that Rome was under attack, dropped his plow, ran to Rome, led the army, defeated the enemy, and then went back to farming. Sacrificed for his country. And so what Sinclair said was, the Northwest Territory must consist of many men like Cincinnatus. And therefore we will call this place the City of the Cincinnati, which is the Latin plural for Cincinnatus. Many Cincinnatuses. Many men willing to sacrifice and be good citizens. And we will start naming places after exemplary heroes. We will call this county Hamilton County, after Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of the Treasury. We will name the fort here Fort Washington, after George Washington. We will do everything we can, in other words, to encourage, by building into the landscape the names of places, names that remind people of the sacrifices that other people had made for them over the years. Now, where people locally name places, where the local people sort of just name the places, you get names like Chillicothe, which is an old Indian name. You get names that are peculiar to the local area. But wherever these guys show up, you get names like Dayton. You get names like Columbus. You get names like Marietta, Athens, Oxford. All of them. You know, why Ohio University in Athens, Miami University in Oxford? European educational centers, associating them with great places in the past. In the same way that the whole landscape had to be developed in a way, not just counties, but you had to build right away courthouses. You had to build places to put flags up. You had to establish the authority of the United States legitimately, so that the United States then could establish the basic forms and structures of government in the 1790s that would allow the United States to expand across the continent in a way that balanced both the rights of the people and the need for orderly development. Now, how this gets played out in the 1790s is over basically three issues, one of which is the Indians. The second issue is the question of internal improvements, or what we would call infrastructure. The third is education, and they fall out with each other and end up writing a new form of government, which is the Ohio Constitution of 1803, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But